"Don't talk to my mom like that," shouted the 5-year-old daughter at the CEO. What seemed like the end turned into the beginning of an unexpected love, a story that will touch your heart. Subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and comment where you are watching from. The conference room on the 23rd floor of the mirrored corporate building in New York looked like a glass box suspended over the city. Down below, the Friday afternoon traffic buzzed like an anxious anthill, but inside, the silence was so dense it seemed to suck the oxygen from the air. The frosted glass walls trembled slightly with the hum of the air conditioning, and the smell of reheated coffee mingled with the aroma of cheese puffs that someone had forgotten in the break room on the 10th floor. Sarah Johnson, 29 years old, felt cold sweat trickle down her neck as she presented the quarterly reports on the screen. Her fingers trembled imperceptibly over the remote control for the projector. She wore a navy blue blazer that she had bought in 3 installments at Macy's, paired with black dress pants that concealed a small tear in the back pocket. Her brown hair was tied up in a bun that took 15 minutes to make presentable, and she mentally prayed that no one would notice that her nails had been unpolished for 2 weeks. Across the massive oak table, David Smith observed each slide with an unreadable expression. At 38 years old, he was the embodiment of a successful American CEO. Impeccably styled black hair, a clean-shaven face from a personal barber every morning, and a charcoal grey suit that cost more than Sarah's monthly salary. His dark brown eyes had that characteristic hardness of someone who learned too early not to show weakness. A Mont Blanc pen spun between his fingers with precise mechanical movements. The third quarter numbers show a 17% growth in the development area. Sarah spoke with a firm voice, although her heart hammered in her chest. We implemented the new agile methodology that reduced delivery time by... The door to the room opened with a soft creak. Sarah froze mid-sentence. A little girl of 5 rushed in, her sandals flashing with lights at every step. Emma had curly brown hair bouncing around her round face, large expressive eyes like her mother's, and wore a slightly wrinkled pink dress with a unicorn print. In her small hands, she held a tablet playing an episode of Paw Patrol at the lowest possible volume. "Emma!" Sarah dropped the remote, her face burning with embarrassment. "Sweetheart, I asked you to stay in the playroom." "Mum, the tablet's running out of battery," the girl whispered loudly, her wide eyes scanning all those adults in formal attire. "And I'm thirsty." David leaned slightly in his chair, furrowing his brows. His jaw visibly tensed. "Sarah, you brought a child to the office?" His voice was deep, controlled, but carried a tone of disapproval that made everyone in the room shrink back. "On a quarterly meeting day?" Sarah felt her cheeks burn even more. Her fingers gripped the remote so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Mr. Smith, I apologize. Emma's nanny had a family emergency, and the school closed early because of the holiday. I had no one to leave her with, and..." She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of dozens of judging eyes. "And I couldn't miss this meeting." "Couldn't miss?" David repeated, his voice acquiring a cutting coldness. "Do you know how many people depend on these decisions? How much money is at stake? And you think it's acceptable to turn a strategic meeting into a daycare?" The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes, but she resolutely refused to let them fall. Not there, not in front of everyone. She had worked 3 years at that company, always arriving at 7 in the morning to make up for any early departures, taking work home every night after putting Emma to bed. And now she was being publicly humiliated for something completely out of her control. "Mr. Smith, she began, her voice faltering. "Don't talk to my mum." "Like that!" Emma's high-pitched voice cut through the air like thunder on a clear day. The girl had dropped the tablet in the nearest chair and marched up to the head of the table, standing right in front of David with her little arms crossed and her chin raised in pure defiance. Her brown eyes, identical to Sarah's, shot daggers at the most powerful man in that office without a trace of fear. "My mom works really hard," Emma continued, her voice trembling but firm. "She wakes up early, makes my breakfast, takes me to school, works all day and still plays with me at night even when she's tired. You can't talk to her like that." David blinked, completely taken aback. Never, in 13 years of running that company, had anyone raised their voice at him like that, much less a 5-year-old in flashing sandals. Sarah was paralyzed with shock and horror. Part of her wanted to run and grab Emma, apologize 1,000 times, maybe even start looking for a new job that very night. But another part, a very small and rebellious part that she had kept locked away for years, felt fierce pride for that brave little girl. "Emma, please," Sarah began, taking a step forward. "No, Mom." Emma turned to her with tear-filled eyes. "He's being rude. Grandma always says you can't be rude to people, especially when they're doing their best." David took a deep breath, running a hand over his face in a rare gesture of uncertainty. Everyone in the room watched the scene with expressions ranging from shock and embarrassment to, on some faces, barely concealed satisfaction. David's brother-in-law, the CFO, had a minimal smile at the corners of his lips, clearly satisfied with the situation that could tarnish Sarah's reputation. Beatrice, the 52-year-old executive assistant who had worked with David for 15 years, sat rigidly in her chair, her face showing absolute disapproval. She had always made it clear that she found it inappropriate when employees brought personal problems into the corporate environment. David stared at the girl for a long moment. His dark eyes scanned the wrinkled unicorn dress, the cheap light-up sandals, the messy curls, and finally landed on her determined face. Her eyes bright with contained tears, yet full of fierce courage. Something stirred within his chest. A strange, uncomfortable feeling, as if an armor he had worn for so long was developing a crack. "Everyone is dismissed," he finally said, not taking his eyes off Emma. "The meeting continues Monday at 9. A murmur swept through the room as people stood up, grabbing laptops, folders, and cell phones. Sarah remained frozen, unable to move, unable to breathe properly. "Sarah, you stay," David added when she made a move to leave. "We need to talk." The room emptied in seconds, the sound of hurried footsteps on the grey carpet, the dragging of chairs, the click of folders closing, all happened in a blur of movement as the executives fled, the awkward situation like rats abandoning a sinking ship. Charles was the last to leave, casting a glance at Sarah that she couldn't fully decipher. There was something there, perhaps pity, perhaps satisfaction. Maybe both. When the glass door closed with a muffled sound, silence returned to fill every inch of the room. Sarah could hear her own heart pounding in her ears, a frantic drum of anxiety. Her hands trembled visibly now, and she hid them behind her back, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. Emma remained planted in the same spot, still staring at David with that unwavering courage that only children possess, an inability to comprehend social hierarchies and professional consequences. She had turned her head slightly to observe the adults leaving, but now her eyes returned to the CEO, suspicious and protective. David slowly rose from his chair. He was tall, about 6 feet 1 inch, and when he stood, his presence dominated the space in a way that Sarah had always found intimidating. He walked around the enormous oak table, his Italian shoes making soft sounds against the carpet. He approached until he was just a few feet away from Emma, then, surprisingly, knelt down to her eye level. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice deep but without the harshness from before. Emma hesitated for the first time, glancing quickly at her mother, as if seeking permission. Sarah nodded slightly, still unable to find words. "Emma Smith," the girl replied, lifting her chin again. "I'm 5 years old and in kindergarten, and you shouldn't have been rude to my mum." A ghost of a smile passed across David's lips, so quick that Sarah almost thought she imagined it. "You're right," he said simply. "I shouldn't have." Emma blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Her defensive posture softened slightly. "Is that true?" she asked, her voice losing some of its belligerence. "It is true," David confirmed. Then he turned to Sarah, still kneeling. Their eyes met, and for the first time since she started working there 3 years ago, Sarah saw something different in his gaze. It wasn't exactly warmth, but perhaps the beginning of a thaw. "Sarah, I apologize for the tone I used. It was inappropriate and unfair." Sarah felt the ground slip beneath her feet. David Smith was apologizing? The man she had seen fire a manager for being 5 minutes late without blinking? The CEO who had a reputation for never admitting mistakes, who had ruled the company with an iron fist since taking over at 25 when his father had suffered a stroke. "Mr. Smith, I'm the one who needs to apologize," she began, the words tumbling out. "I shouldn't have brought Emma. It was completely inappropriate, and it won't happen again. I can reschedule the presentation, redo the slides if you prefer a different format, and I assure you that—" "Sarah," he interrupted, standing up and returning to his normal height. "Stop. You don't need to apologize for juggling impossible tasks to keep your life running." He walked to the enormous window overlooking Fifth Avenue. Outside, the Friday afternoon sun painted the mirrored buildings in golden and orange hues. The traffic was a slow-moving red metal snake. "I grew up in this company," David said, more to the window than to Sarah. "My grandfather founded it in 1972 in a 40-square-meter office in the Consolação area. My father took over in the 90s and turned it into what it is today. I was 25, freshly graduated in business administration from NYU, when he had the stroke. Ischemic, right side of the brain. He spent 3 weeks in the ICU at Mount Sinai." Sarah remained silent, unsure of where this conversation was headed. Emma had taken her tablet back and was sitting in a chair too big for her, swinging her legs that didn't reach the ground. When he woke up, he could no longer speak properly, half of his face paralyzed. The words came out jumbled. David continued, his voice taking on a distant quality, as if he were reliving those days. "He looked at me in that hospital bed surrounded by tubes and beeping machines and managed to say, just one clear thing. Don't let it sink. The company. 400 employees at the time, dozens of families depending on us." He turned to look at her again. "So, I sacrificed everything. Relationships that ended because I didn't have time. Friendships that dissolved because I only talked about work. Friday nights spent here in this office instead of being at a bar with people my age. I became what the company needed. My voice grew harsher, efficient, relentless, focused solely on results." "Mr. Smith, I don't understand why you're telling me this," Sarah said softly. "Because your daughter just gave me the biggest scolding I've had in years," he replied, and there was something close to admiration in his voice. "And she is absolutely right. I've turned into a man who values spreadsheets more than people, who forgot that numbers represent real lives, real families, real sacrifices." Emma looked up from her tablet, paying attention for the first time in the adult conversation. "Are you really going to apologize to my mum?" she asked, with that brutal honesty of children. David walked over to Sarah. She could smell the expensive cologne he wore, something woody and sophisticated that probably cost a fortune. He extended his hand. "Sarah Johnson, I'm sorry for being an insensitive jerk," he said, formal but with genuine sincerity in his eyes. You are one of the best systems analysts this company has ever had. Your reports are impeccable, your solutions are creative, and you solve problems that others don't even identify. And more than that, you do all of this while being a single mother. That's not weakness, it's superhuman strength. Sarah felt tears burning her eyes again, but this time for completely different reasons. She squeezed his hand, feeling the firm and calloused grip. "Thank you, sir," she murmured, her voice faltering. "David," he corrected. "In this room, you can call me David." "See, Mum?" Emma said excitedly, triumphantly. "He apologized. Now you guys are friends." Sarah couldn't help a wet laugh, quickly wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "That's not how it works, sweetheart." "Your daughter brought a tablet with a low battery," David said, changing the subject with surprising skill. "My secretary has a universal charger on her desk. Do you want me to get it?" "No, you don't have to bother. It's no trouble." He was already walking toward the door. "You two stay here. Enjoy the cheese puffs from the break room. They should still be warm. I'll be right back." And so David Smith, CEO of one of the largest tech companies in New York, left the meeting room to fetch a tablet charger for a 5-year-old girl. Sarah sank into a chair, feeling as if she had run a marathon. Emma came to her immediately, climbing into her lap with the familiarity of always. "Mom, are you okay?" she asked, her little fingers gently touching Sarah's face. "I am, my love." Sarah hugged her daughter tightly, breathing in the scent of strawberry shampoo in the girl's curls. "You were very brave today, but you were also a little inconvenient. Grandma always says we have to stand up for the people we love," Emma replied with the simple logic of childhood. "Grandma is right," Sarah whispered, kissing the top of her daughter's head as they waited for David to return. Sarah looked out the huge window at the city below. New York buzzed with its 12 million inhabitants, each carrying their own stories, struggles, and victories. And there, on the 23rd floor of a corporate building on Fifth Avenue, something had changed. She didn't yet know how much. Monday arrived with the typical grey sky of June in New York. Sarah woke up at 5:30 to the sound of her cell phone alarm, a soft tone she had set not to scare Emma. The house they lived in, a 2-bedroom apartment in a walk-up building in Brooklyn, and was still dark and cold. She dragged herself out of bed, feeling the heaviness of a restless night filled with confusing dreams about meeting rooms and dark brown eyes watching her with disturbing intensity. In the tiny bathroom, as the hot water from the shower took an eternity to warm up, Sarah stared at her reflection in the foggy mirror. Deep circles marked her face. At 29, sometimes she felt like she was 40. Fatigue was a constant presence, an invisible weight she had carried on her shoulders since Emma's father disappeared from their lives when the girl was only 6 months old. "You can do this," she whispered to herself, an affirmation she repeated every morning like a mantra. "You are strong. You can do this." At 6:15, Emma was still fast asleep, hugging her faded teddy bear. Sarah prepared breakfast. French bread from the bakery on the corner with butter, chocolate milk in Emma's favorite frozen cup, and a sliced banana. She set everything up on the kitchen table before waking her daughter with gentle kisses on her face. "Good morning, my sunshine," she murmured. "Time to wake up." Emma grumbled, curling up even more in her thin blanket. "5 more minutes, Mom." "No 5 more minutes. You have school and Mommy has work." Sarah gently pulled the blanket. "Come on, princess. Get up. Breakfast is on the table." The morning routine was a dance, choreographed by repetition, helping Emma brush her teeth, combing her unruly curls and tying them with a pink elastic, dressing her in the school uniform, navy blue pants and a white shirt with the public school logo. While Emma had breakfast, Sarah ran a comb through her own hair, applied a minimal amount of makeup to disguise her fatigue, and put on the same navy blue blazer. It was Friday, this time with a simple white blouse underneath. At 7:10, they were at the building's entrance, waiting for the bus that would take them to Emma's school. The sky remained grey, threatening rain. Sarah held her daughter's pink backpack in one hand and her own synthetic leather bag in the other. Emma swayed back and forth, humming a song from a children's show. "Mom," she suddenly said, looking up with those big, curious eyes, "are you going to see the man who yelled at you?" Sarah swallowed hard. "He didn't exactly yell, sweetheart, and yes, I'm going to see him. He's the CEO of the company where I work." "Did he really apologize?" Emma insisted. "He did, my love. And you don't need to worry about it, okay?" "Okay," Emma easily accepted, already distracted by the arrival of the bus. After dropping Emma off at school, with long kisses and promises to pick her up right at 5 in the afternoon, Sarah took another bus, heading towards Fifth Avenue. The hour and 15-minute journey was always the same. Crowded bus. People squeezed together, the smell of sweat mixed with cheap perfumes. The vehicle swaying over bumps and potholes of New York streets. She used this time to answer emails on her phone, review presentations, plan her day. But today, her mind kept drifting back to that Friday, to David's eyes when he knelt down to talk to Emma, to the sincerity in his voice when he apologized, to that crack she had noticed in his corporate armor. "Don't be an idiot, Sarah," she thought to herself, shaking her head. "He's the CEO. You're a junior analyst. He was just being polite. That's all. It means nothing." She arrived at the office at 8:40, 20 minutes before the official workday began, as always. The mirrored building on Fifth Avenue loomed impressively against the cloudy sky, all glass and steel, a monument to corporate capitalism. The reception area on the ground floor had marble flooring that echoed her footsteps, a blonde receptionist with a professional smile, and a huge company logo on the wall, Tech Vision Solutions. "Good morning, Sarah," the receptionist greeted. "Good morning, Julia." In the elevator, Sarah pressed the button for the 12th floor, where the information technology department was located. The polished metal door closed with a soft hiss, and she watched her distorted reflection as it ascended. Her stomach twisted. She didn't know if it was from the speed of the elevator or the anxiety of facing her colleagues after last Friday's scene. The doors opened with a soft ping. The 12th floor was an open space with low partitions separating workstations, white walls, grey carpet, fluorescent lights, giving everything an artificial cold quality. There were already a few colleagues at their desks, typing on computers, sipping coffee from disposable cups. Sarah had barely set her bag on her desk when Rodrigo, a 32-year-old colleague with whom she had always had a cordial relationship, appeared beside her. He wore a blue plaid shirt and jeans. The IT dress code was more relaxed than the rest of the company. "Hey, Mari," he said, leaning against the partition. "And that Friday, huh? It's become legend in the office." Sarah felt a flush rise up her neck. "Rodrigo, please, I really don't want to talk about—" "Come on, relax," he smiled. But there was something strange in his expression. To be honest, half the office thought it was great. The other half, well, they're saying you used your daughter to score points with Smith. Sarah felt as if she'd been punched in the stomach. "What? Who's saying that?" Rodrigo shrugged, uncomfortable. "You know how it is. Water cooler gossip. The finance team was talking about it yesterday. Charles apparently made some comments." "Charles," Sarah repeated, the name tasting bitter on her tongue. David's brother-in-law, the finance director, had always shown a barely concealed dislike for her. She couldn't tell if it was personal or if he simply despised anyone who wasn't part of the corporate elite. "Look, don't worry." Rodrigo gave her a supportive pat on the shoulder. "Anyone who knows you knows you're a good person. And let's be honest, it was pretty funny to see someone put Smith in his place." Before Sarah could respond, a female voice cut through the air. "Sarah Johnson?" She turned. A woman was standing a few meters away. Elizabeth Johnson, David's executive assistant, was 52, but easily looked 10 years younger. Brown hair in a flawless bob cut, understated yet perfect makeup, a beige suit that screamed expensive in every seam. She carried a brown leather portfolio and had an expression that Sarah could only describe as polished ice. "Yes?" Sarah replied, feeling her stomach tighten again. "Mr. Smith would like to see you in his office, now." The tone left no room for discussion. Rodrigo whistled softly as Elizabeth walked away, her high heels clicking on the carpet. "Good luck," he murmured. "You're going to need it." Sarah grabbed her tablet and a pen, more out of needing something to hold than necessity, and followed Elizabeth to the elevators. They ascended in absolute silence to the 23rd floor, the executive floor. The doors opened to a completely different environment. Hardwood floors, dark grey fabric-finished walls, abstract artwork strategically hung, designer furniture that Sarah vaguely recognized from decor magazines. "This way," Elizabeth said, guiding her down a corridor. David's office was at the end of the hall, behind a pair of dark wooden double doors. Elizabeth knocked twice before opening. Mr. Sarah Johnson, the analyst, formally announced, "Thank you, Elizabeth. Could you please leave us alone?" Sarah entered the office and felt as if she had stepped into another world. It was enormous, easily 3 times the size of the Friday meeting room. A whole wall of glass overlooked Fifth Avenue, offering a spectacular view of the city. David's desk was an imposing piece of oak, with 2 computer monitors, a neatly organized stack of documents, and a framed photo that Sarah couldn't quite see from that distance. Bookshelves covered another wall, titles on business, economics, and some classics of American literature. David was standing near the window, facing away from her. He wore black dress pants and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing tanned forearms. He was looking at the city below, hands in his pockets. "Please, have a seat," he said without turning around. Sarah sat in one of the leather chairs in front of the desk, placing her tablet on her lap. Her fingers nervously drummed on the smooth surface. David finally turned around. There was something different about him today, a tension in his jaw, a shadow under his eyes that suggested he might not have slept well either. "Thank you for coming," he said, walking over to sit in his own chair. "I imagine you're wondering why I called you here." "That thought crossed my mind," Sarah admitted, trying to keep her voice steady. "I need to talk to you about the AI innovation project," he said, picking up a folder from the desk. "I've been following your work for some time. Your solutions to the integration problem in the CRM system were brilliant. The way you optimized the mobile app code reduced loading time by 40%. Sarah blinked, surprised. "You follow my work specifically?" "I keep track of all key employees," David replied, but there was something in the way he said it that made Sarah suspect it wasn't entirely true. "We're launching a new initiative. Artificial intelligence applied to corporate solutions. It's the future of the company, and I want you leading the development. Team." Sarah's world stopped spinning for a moment. "You want me leading?" "You," he confirmed, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made something strange happen in Sarah's chest. "I know it's a big promotion. It will involve more responsibility, more hours, more pressure. That's why I need you to be honest with me. Can you handle this? With Emma, with your circumstances?" And there it was, the question Sarah feared and hoped for at the same time. Sarah felt the anger bubbling in her chest, hot and familiar. It was the same anger she felt every time someone questioned her ability to be both a mother and a professional, as if the two were mutually exclusive. Her fingers tightened around the tablet, knuckles turning white. "With all due respect, Mr. Smith," she said, her voice coming out colder than she intended, My personal circumstances have never interfered with the quality of my work. I deliver everything on time, often ahead of schedule. My reports are impeccable. My code has fewer bugs than most senior developers in this company. David raised one hand, a gesture of appeasement. I know that. I'm not questioning your competence, Sarah. I'm questioning whether you want to take on something that will demand even more from you. Because leading a team isn't just about technical skill. It's about being available for last-minute meetings, occasional business trips, late nights working when critical issues arise. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the oak desk. I'm asking you this because I respect you too much. Not to be honest, this opportunity could be incredible for your career, but it could also be overwhelming. And I need to know if you really want this, or if you feel you have to accept it because your boss is asking. Sarah took a deep breath, forcing herself to think rationally. Outside, through the enormous window, New York was bustling under the grey sky. A plane crossed the low clouds, leaving a white trail that quickly dissolved. "Can I be honest with you?" she asked. "I prefer that you are." "I want this opportunity more than anything," Sarah admitted, feeling a lump in her throat. "I studied for 5 years, attending college at night while working during the day as a telemarketer. I graduated 8 months pregnant. I defended my thesis 2 weeks after having Emma. Everything in my life is difficult, Mr. Smith. It always has been, but I have never ever used that as an excuse not to give my best." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What scares me isn't the amount of work. It's the judgment. Because if I accept this position and one day need to leave early because Emma is sick, they'll say I shouldn't have accepted. If I ask to do meetings via video conference instead of traveling, they'll say that women with children aren't fit for leadership positions. And if I give my blood, sweat and tears and something still goes wrong with the project, they'll say it was because I was distracted with personal issues." David was silent for a long moment, his eyes fixed on her with that unsettling intensity. Sarah could see his jaw tense, a muscle pulsing slightly. "You're right," he finally said, "and that's absolutely unfair." "It's the reality," Sarah replied with a weary shrug. "There's no point in complaining. It's learn to play the game or be left out." "What if I change the rules of the game?" Sarah blinked. "What do you mean?" David stood up, walking back to the window. He stood there, with his back to her, hands in the pockets of his dress pants. The grey light of day highlighted the silver strands that were beginning to appear at his temples. He was young for a CEO, but the pressure was clearly taking its toll. "My father founded this company with very clear principles," he began, his voice taking on a reflective tone. "Hard work, absolute dedication, personal sacrifice in the name of professional success. He worked 16 hours a day, missed birthdays, Christmases, graduations. My mother practically raised my sister Julia and me alone." He turned to face her. "When he had the stroke, do you know what one of his biggest regrets was? That he had spent his life building an empire, but barely knew his own children. That he had a picture of Julia graduating in psychology on his desk, but couldn't really remember the ceremony because he was on the phone dealing with a crisis the whole time." Sarah didn't know what to say, so she remained silent. "I've turned into an even worse version of him," David continued, and there was something almost painful in his voice. "At least my father had a family at home. I have... What? This company, this office, endless meetings with people who smile in my face, but I know would talk behind my back at the first opportunity." He walked back to the table, but instead of sitting down, he leaned against the edge, getting closer to Sarah. "On Friday, when your daughter confronted me, do you know what I felt?" he asked. "Shame. Shame for having become the kind of person who humiliates an exceptional employee because she dares to have a life outside of work. Shame for having built a corporate culture where people are afraid to be human. Mr. Smith, David, he gently corrected. When we're alone, you can call me David. And let me tell you something, Sarah. If you agree to lead this project, I will support you, truly, not with empty words, but with actions. Important meetings will be scheduled during school hours whenever possible. Video conferences will be a valid option. If Emma gets sick and you need to leave, no one will question your commitment. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked quickly to hold them back. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice coming out weaker than she intended. "Why me?" David held her gaze for a long moment. There was something happening there in the space between them, an invisible electric current that made Sarah's heart race inappropriately, considering they were in a professional meeting. "Because you remind me why I started all this," he finally said. "Not to have power or money, but to build something that mattered, something that made a difference in people's lives. And you make a difference. In your daughter's life, in your colleagues' lives, in the projects you touch. You are real, Sarah. In a corporate world full of masks and political games, you are frighteningly real." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken things. Sarah could hear her own heart beating, could feel the heat rising up her neck. This was dangerous. What was happening between her and David at that moment completely transcended the appropriate professional boundaries. "I accept," she said, breaking the moment before it could turn into something she would regret. "I accept to lead the project." A genuine smile lit up David's face, transforming his severe features into something almost jovial. It was striking how that smile made him different, more approachable, more human. "Great." He returned to his chair, grabbing a folder. "I'll need you to assemble a team. You can choose anyone you want from the IT department. I'll also allocate a budget to hire 2 senior external developers if necessary." He slid the folder across the table to Sarah. "Here's the complete project briefing. The initial deadline is 8 months for us to have a functional prototype. I know it's tight, but the investors are pushing. Read it carefully, take notes, and tomorrow we'll meet with the board to present your proposed approach." Sarah took the folder, feeling its literal and metaphorical. "Wait, tomorrow? Already?" "Welcome to the world of leadership," David said with a half-smile. "Things happen fast up here." Sarah stood up, holding the folder and the tablet. "David," she used his first name for the first time, feeling it strange on her tongue. "Thank you, really, for believing in me." "Don't thank me yet," he replied, returning to being professional. "This project is going to be hell. They're going to try to bring you down, especially my brother-in-law. Charles wanted to put one of his sycophants in this position." "I can handle Charles." "I'm sure you can," David said. And there was something close to pride in his voice. "After all, you've faced worse, like a feisty 5-year-old girl defending her mother." Sarah laughed, a genuine laugh that dissolved some of the tension she had been carrying since Friday. "She is pretty intimidating." "She's amazing," David corrected, "just like her mother." Sarah felt the blush rise again and quickly said goodbye before she could do or say anything embarrassing. She left the office with shaky legs, her heart still racing, the folder heavy in her hands. Elizabeth was in the outer office, typing something on the computer with mechanical efficiency. She looked at Sarah with an expression that revealed nothing, but Sarah could feel the coldness emanating from her like ice. "Congratulations on the promotion," Elizabeth said, and each word seemed to be carved from ice. It must be gratifying to rise so quickly. There was a subtle poison in those words, an insinuation that made Sarah stop and turn around. "It was on merit," she said. She said firmly, "Not for favors." "Of course it was," Elizabeth replied with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just be careful, dear. People talk, and not all opportunities are worth the reputation they cost." Sarah held her tongue. She wasn't going to give the satisfaction of a response. She simply nodded politely and headed for the elevator, feeling Elizabeth's eyes burning into her back. In the elevator, alone, Sarah finally allowed herself to process everything that had happened. A promotion, a huge project. Raphael's attention in a way that went beyond professional. She wasn't naive. She had felt that chemistry between them, that dangerous attraction that shouldn't exist. Don't be an idiot, she told herself in the reflection of the elevator door. He's your boss. This can only end badly. Focus on work. Focus on doing your best. Focus on building a better future for you and for Emma. But when she reached her desk on the 12th floor and opened the folder with the project briefing, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about Raphael's dark brown eyes, the sincerity in his voice, the smile that had completely transformed his face. She was in trouble. Deep trouble. And worst of all, a part of her didn't care at all. 2 weeks passed in a whirlwind of meetings, spreadsheets, codes, and sleepless nights. Sarah had assembled her team. Ryan, who despite the gossip remained an excellent developer. Camilla, a 23-year-old junior programmer with raw talent for machine learning, and 2 external consultants that Raphael had approved without hesitation. The project budget was larger than Sarah had ever managed, and the responsibility weighed on her shoulders like a backpack full of stones. It was a rainy Tuesday in June when everything began to crumble. Sarah was in her new office, a perk of the promotion, although it was tiny compared to the executive offices, reviewing lines of code on her computer. The rain pounded against the window with force, turning Fifth Avenue down below into a blurred watercolor of red brake lights and yellowed headlights. The phone rang. It was Emma's school. "Hello?" Sarah answered, already feeling her stomach tighten. Calls from school were never good news. "Ms. Johnson, this is Silvana from the administration." The voice on the other end sounded worried. "Emma has a high fever, 39 degrees. We need you to pick her up as soon as possible." Sarah looked at the clock. 1:30 p.m. She had a meeting with the executives at 3. A crucial presentation about the first advancements of the project. Charles had already questioned the progress twice, insinuating that perhaps she wasn't capable of delivering results at the necessary speed. I'll be right there," Sarah said, hanging up the phone with trembling hands. She grabbed her bag, shut down her computer, and hurried out of the office. In the hallway, she nearly bumped into Ryan. "Whoa, where's the fire?" he joked, but the smile faded when he saw the expression on Sarah's face. "Hey, is everything okay?" "Emma has a high fever. I need to go pick her up," Sarah quickly explained, already walking toward the elevator. "But what about the 3 o'clock meeting?" "It'll have to be without me. Can you present, please?" She pressed the elevator button urgently. "All the slides are ready. You know the material by heart." "Sarah, I'm not the project lead. Charles will use this against you." "I have no choice, Ryan," she practically shouted, then took a deep breath, trying to regain control. "I'm sorry. I have no choice. My daughter needs me." The elevator arrived. Sarah stepped in, pressing the ground floor button repeatedly, as if that would make it go down faster. As the doors began to close, she saw Ryan grab his phone, probably to inform someone about the situation. The rain had intensified. When Sarah exited the building, she didn't have an umbrella. In a matter of seconds, she was drenched, running down the sidewalk toward the bus stop. The cold water streamed down her face, mixing with tears of frustration that she hadn't even realized were falling. It took 40 minutes of hellish traffic, a crowded bus, steaming with humidity and wet people, to reach Emma's school. The girl was in the infirmary, lying on a thin mat, her face flushed with fever, her curls sticking to her sweaty forehead. Upon seeing Sarah, her eyes filled with tears. "Mom!" she whined, reaching out her little arms. Sarah rushed to her, hugging her tightly, feeling the heat radiating from her small body. "It's okay, my love. Mommy is here now," she murmured, kissing her hot forehead. "Let's go home, okay?" The trip home was even worse. Emma was softly crying, complaining that her throat hurt, that she was cold even with the fever. Sarah managed to get an Uber, a luxury she rarely allowed herself because she couldn't bear to make Emma wait at the bus stop in the rain. At home, Sarah gave Emma fever medicine, changed her wet clothes for a dry, warm pajama, made vegetable soup, and sat by her daughter's bed, wiping a damp cloth across her forehead. Emma finally fell asleep, her breathing heavy, her face still flushed. Sarah looked at her phone. 17 unread messages, 3 missed calls. With a knot in her stomach, she opened WhatsApp. Ryan, 3:47 p.m. Sarah, the meeting was a disaster. Charles questioned everything, said the results are unsatisfactory. Ryan, 3:53 p.m. He suggested that maybe you're not the right person to lead the project. He said that employees with compromising family responsibilities shouldn't be in strategic positions. Ryan, 4:02 p.m. Raphael defended you. He was furious. I've never seen him like that, but the damage is done. Half of the executives are questioning her leadership. Sarah felt as if she had been punched in the stomach. 2 weeks. She had held on for 2 weeks before becoming exactly the stereotype everyone expected, the mother who couldn't balance work and family. There was also a message from an unrecognized number, but she recognized it by the office area code. Unknown number, 4:23 p.m. Sarah, it's David. Ryan gave me your number. How is Emma? And you? Need anything? Sarah stared at the message for a long time, her thumbs hovering over the keyboard, unsure of how to respond. Part of her wanted to vent everything. The exhaustion, the frustration, the fear of failing on all fronts. But another part, the proud and stubborn part that had sustained her until now, refused to appear weak. Sarah, 4:34 p.m. She's fine. Fever is going down. Sorry about the meeting, it won't happen again. The reply came almost immediately. David, 4:35 p.m. You don't have to apologize for taking care of your daughter. Never. Got it? David, 4:35 p.m. Can we talk tomorrow? In person. Sarah sighed, putting her phone away. She looked at Emma, sleeping, so small and vulnerable in that bed. Then she glanced around the tiny apartment, at the old worn furniture, at the bills piled on the coffee table that she still hadn't managed to pay. You can't give up, she told herself. Emma depends on you. You can't give up. But God, she was tired. The next morning, Emma woke up without a fever. The resilience of children was impressive. 12 hours earlier, she had been burning with fever, and now she was asking for pancakes at breakfast and humming songs from Frozen. Sarah, on the other hand, had slept at most 3 hours, waking every half hour to check her daughter's temperature. She called her mother Mary, who lived in Miami. "Mum, I'm at my breaking point," Sarah admitted, her voice cracking. "I don't know if I can do this." "Sarah Johnson," Mary's voice came firm through the phone line, with that distinct southern accent. "Whose daughter are you? Your mother raised 5 children alone, working as a housekeeper. Do you think it was easy? There were days I cried on the bus coming home from work, because I didn't know how I was going to put food on the table, but I did, and you will too." "But Mom, I'm failing, at work, as a mother." "You're not failing at anything," Mary interrupted vehemently. "You're juggling 1,000 things and keeping them all in the air. Yesterday 1 ball dropped, and so you pick it up again and keep going. That's what we do, Sarah, we keep going." After hanging up, with promises that if she needed help, Mary would take a 24-hour bus ride from Miami to New York. Without thinking twice, Sarah got ready to go to the office. She left Emma at her ex's mother's house, Mrs. Aparecida, a kind lady who adored her granddaughter, even while hating her own son for abandoning the family. At the office, Sarah went straight to the 23rd floor. Elizabeth greeted her with that cold smile of hers. Mr. Smith is waiting, she said, and there was something satisfied in her tone that made Sarah shudder. David was on the phone when Sarah entered, but he gestured for her to sit down. He was wearing a navy blue suit today, no tie, the first 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He looked tired too. There were shadows under his eyes that hadn't been there last week. "No, I'm not going to reconsider," he was saying on the phone, his voice tense. "Sarah is still leading the project. End of story. I don't care what the board thinks, Charles. You're not the president of this company. I am. Yes, that's exactly how it works. Bye." He hung up with more force than necessary, running a hand over his face in a gesture of exhaustion. "Sorry you had to hear that," he said to Sarah. "Was it Charles? He's campaigning to have you removed from the project. He gathered half the board during dinner last night, claiming you're a risky bet." David made air quotes with his fingers, sarcasm dripping from his words. Sarah felt anger bubbling up again. "And you? Do you think I'm a risky bet?" David stood up, walking around the table until he was closer to her. He sat on the edge of the table, meeting Sarah's gaze. "I think you're the most competent person this company has, and I think my brother-in-law is a prejudiced idiot who's afraid of anyone who threatens his little empire of mediocrity." "David." "Listen, Sarah," he continued, leaning slightly forward. "Yesterday was tough, I won't lie, but you made the right choice. Your daughter needed you, and you know what? A project can wait. It can be rescheduled, adjusted, modified. But you only have one chance to be Emma's mother, one, and I won't be the one who makes you choose between the two." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. She blinked quickly, refusing to cry there. "Why are you doing this?" she asked for the second time in 2 weeks. "Why are you defending me like this?" David was silent for a long moment. His eyes scanned Sarah's face, the dark circles, the anxious, bitten lips, the stubborn determination that shone even through the exhaustion. "Because you make me want to be a better person," he finally said, with brutal honesty. "Because when I see you doing everything you do, being a mother and a professional and still finding energy to be kind to those around you, you make me question everything I thought I knew about success." The air between them was charged with something dangerous and inevitable. Sarah could smell his cologne, see the texture of his well-groomed beard. On his jawline, notice how his eyes had tiny golden flecks she had never noticed before. "David, this is," she began, not knowing how to finish the sentence. "Inappropriate," he completed with a half-hearted, humorless smile. "I know. Believe me, I know. You work for me. There's a clear hierarchy. I should maintain professional distance." He stood up, stepping away, creating physical space between them. "But I can't stop thinking about you," he admitted, turning his back to her, looking out the window. "And it's not just attraction, Sarah, although it would be a lie to say that doesn't exist. 2, it's admiration, respect, a connection I haven't felt in years. Maybe I never truly felt it." Sarah was frozen in her chair, her heart pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "I can't," she whispered. "David, I can't get involved with you. I have a daughter. I have a reputation that is already being questioned. If people knew—" "I know," he turned to face her. "You're right, completely. That's why I'm going to do this. I'll step back. Professionally, you will report directly to Mark, the technology director. I will continue to oversee the project, but from a distance." Sarah didn't expect that, and the pang of disappointment she felt was entirely unjustified and completely illogical. "Okay," she said, standing up. "I think it's better this way." She walked to the door, but when she put her hand on the doorknob, she heard David's voice. "Sarah," she turned, "one day, when this project is over, when there's no more hierarchy between us, I would like to invite you to dinner, as David, not as your boss, and you can say no and it will be fine, but I needed you to know." Sarah held his gaze for a long moment. One day, she repeated softly, when the project is over. And she left the office before she could change her mind. July arrived with a dry cold that was rare in New York. The mornings dawned with a thick fog that swallowed the buildings on Fifth Avenue, transforming the city into a ghostly scene. Sarah spent her days immersed in codes, algorithms, and endless meetings, while her nights were dedicated to Emma: homework, bath, dinner, bedtime stories. It had been 3 weeks since that conversation in David's office, 3 weeks since he had deliberately stepped back as promised. Now, Sarah reported to Mark Thompson, the technology director, a 45-year-old, bald, portly man who had the annoying habit of interrupting her mid-sentence to explain things she already knew. But at least there was no longer that electric tension, that constant danger of crossing lines that shouldn't be crossed. Or at least that was what Sarah told herself every time she caught herself looking for David in the hallways or feeling a pang of disappointment when days went by without seeing him. It was a Friday afternoon when everything changed again. Sarah was in her office, testing the new interface of the AI system when Jessica walked in unannounced, her face pale. "Sarah, you need to see this," she said, turning her laptop to show the screen. It was an email from Charles, addressed to the entire board of directors, with copies to the managers and directors of the company. Subject: concerns about the AI innovation project. Sarah read quickly, feeling the blood freeze in her veins with each line. After careful analysis of the results thus far, I have serious reservations about the current leadership's ability to deliver the project on time and within budget. Delays are consistent, milestones are not being met, and there is a clear lack of availability from the project leader for the full dedication that an initiative of this magnitude requires. Consistent delays? Sarah practically spat the words. We're ahead of schedule, milestones not met. We've exceeded all the metrics for the quarter. He's blatantly lying, Jessica agreed, her voice trembling with indignation. But look who's copied. He sent this to everyone important in the company. Sarah closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She could feel the walls closing in around her. Charles was not just questioning her competence. He was actively sabotaging her reputation in front of the entire leadership of the company. "Where's Ryan?" Sarah asked, already grabbing her phone. "Conference room 5. He's with the external consultants reviewing the code for the learning module." Sarah left the room in quick steps, blood boiling. She walked down the hallway, ran up the stairs. She had no patience to wait for the elevator, and practically burst through the door of the conference room. Ryan was hunched over a laptop next to the 2 consultants, Michael and Anna. "Ryan, did you see Charles's email?" Sarah asked without preamble. Ryan grimaced. "I saw it. Half the office has already seen it. The corporate WhatsApp is on fire." "He's lying!" Sarah slammed her hand on the table hard enough to make everyone jump. "We're meeting all the deadlines. The results are excellent. Why is he doing this?" "Because he wants you out of the project," Anna, the external consultant, said calmly. She was a 50-year-old woman with grey hair tied back in a ponytail, wearing red-framed glasses. "And because he knows that repeated lies start to sound like the truth." "So what do I do?" Sarah asked, feeling despair starting to take over. "How do I fight this?" "You don't fight with anger," Michael, the other consultant, said. A consultant replied. He was younger, perhaps in his 30s, wearing an Iron Maiden shirt and had tattoos climbing up his arms. "You fight with data, facts, irrefutable evidence." Ryan stood up, adjusting his glasses on his nose. "He's right. Let's prepare a comprehensive report. All milestones achieved, all deadlines met, comparison between expected progress and actual progress, and we'll present this at the board meeting next week." "Board meeting?" Sarah repeated. "I don't have access to the board meeting." "You will," said a voice from the door. Everyone turned, David was standing in the doorway, wearing a grey turtleneck under a black blazer. His eyes were fixed on Sarah with an intensity that made something twist in her stomach. "I will make sure you have a voice in the board meeting," he continued, stepping into the room. "Charles is playing dirty politics, and I won't allow him to destroy someone's work with lies." "David, Mr. Smith," Sarah quickly corrected herself, aware of the others in the room. "I don't want to cause trouble between you and your family. Charles may be my brother-in-law, but that doesn't give him the right to sabotage competent employees," David replied, his voice as hard as steel. "And between him and you, Sarah, I know exactly who has the integrity and capability this company needs." The silence that followed was heavy. Ryan looked from David to Sarah, his eyebrows raising significantly. Jessica, who had followed Sarah into the room, had a tiny smile on her lips. "All right," Anna broke the moment. "Then let's get to work. We have a week to build an irrefutable defense. I'll need access to all project metrics, all progress reports, all meeting minutes." "I'll arrange that," Ryan said immediately. "And I want a complete financial report," David added. "Budget versus actual spending. I want to prove that we are not only delivering technical results, but also being fiscally responsible." For the next hour, they worked together, dividing tasks, compiling data, building arguments. Sarah discreetly observed David, the way he thought strategically, how he considered all angles, how he protected his team. When the others left to grab coffee and documents, Sarah and David were alone in the room for a few moments. "You didn't have to do this," Sarah said, softly. "Confronting your brother-in-law for my sake." David turned to face her, leaning on the table. "It's not for your sake, Sarah. It's for what's right. Charles is trying to implement a culture where politics matter more than competence, where family connections are worth more than merit. I didn't build this company to be that kind of place." "Still," Sarah insisted, "it will create family problems. Your sister—" "Julia?" David let out a short laugh. "My sister can barely stand her husband. She would side with you in a heartbeat." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "How are you? Really? With all this, with the pressure—" "I'm holding it together," Sarah replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. "Emma is doing better. The project is going well, despite what Charles says. I'm tired. But when am I not, right?" David studied her face for a long moment. "You know you can ask for help, right? You don't have to do everything alone." "I've always done everything alone," Sarah replied, shrugging. "It's what I know. It doesn't have to be that way forever." There was something in the way he said that, a veiled promise, a possibility, of a future that made Sarah's heart race in a completely inappropriate way. The door opened, and Ryan returned carrying a stack of folders, breaking the moment. "I found the financial reports from the last 3 months," he announced. "And guys, the numbers are even better than I remembered. We're 10% under budget." "Perfect," David said, instantly returning to professional mode. "That will shut him up about wasting resources." The next 7 days were a marathon. Sarah worked late every night, came home exhausted, spent a few precious hours with Emma, and then continued working after the girl fell asleep. Ryan and Jessica put in ridiculous overtime. The external consultants worked weekends. Emma, noticing that her mom was more stressed than usual, drew a picture at school. Sarah in a superhero cape, holding a computer in one hand and Emma in the other, with the words written in crooked, childlike letters, "My mom is the strongest woman in the world." Sarah taped that drawing to the wall of her office and looked at it every time she felt like giving up. The night before the board meeting, Sarah was in her apartment, reviewing the presentation for the 1,000th time, when her phone rang. It was a private number. "Hello?" she answered. "Sarah, it's Julia Smith." Sarah sat up straight in her chair. David's sister, the psychologist. Why was she calling? "Hi, Julia. How are you?" "Sorry for calling late," Julia said, her voice warm and friendly. "I know you must be busy preparing for tomorrow, but I wanted you to know something. My brother talked about you." Sarah felt her heart race. "Oh, really?" "He doesn't talk about people, ever. He's been closed off like an oyster forever," Julia continued. "But yesterday at a family lunch he wouldn't. Stop talking about the AI project, about your leadership, about how brilliant you are. And Charles tried to plant poison, making insinuations about favoritism, and David practically exploded." "Julia, I don't want to cause any trouble." "You're not causing anything," Julia firmly interrupted her. "It's my husband who is causing, and I want you to know that I'm not blind to the kind of person he is. Politician, manipulator, obsessed with power. I'm in the process of separating, by the way, but that's another story." Marina fell silent, processing that information. "What I mean is," Julia continued, "tomorrow when you walk into that boardroom, remember that you have allies. You're not alone. And between my brother and my soon-to-be ex-husband, I know exactly who to choose." "Thank you," Marina said, her voice choked. "That means a lot." After hanging up, Marina looked at Emma sleeping on the couch, her mouth slightly open, one arm draped over her teddy bear. She glanced at the drawing on the wall. She looked at the open presentation on the laptop. "You can do this," she told herself. "Tomorrow you will walk into that room and show them what you're capable of." And for the first time in weeks, she truly believed it. The boardroom was on the 24th floor, one floor above David's office, reserved exclusively for the company's most strategic decisions. Marina had never been there before. When the elevator doors opened that Thursday morning, she was greeted by an environment that screamed power and money: travertine marble floors, walls lined with oak, artworks that probably cost more than her entire apartment. Marina wore her best suit, a navy blue ensemble she had bought on sale at Macy's, paired with a white satin blouse and medium-heeled shoes that hurt her feet, but made her look taller, more confident. She had spent 40 minutes that morning fixing her hair, pinning her curls into an elegant bun that she hoped would convey professionalism. Emma had hugged her legs before she left, looking up with those big eyes. "You're going to crush it, Mom," she had said, with the seriousness of an adult trapped in a 5-year-old's body. "Just like that princess from the cartoon who faces the dragon." "There's no dragon today, sweetheart," Marina had replied, laughing nervously. "Yes, there is," Emma insisted, "but you're stronger than him." Now, standing in front of the double-carved wooden doors leading to the boardroom, Marina took a deep breath 3 times. She could hear muffled voices from the other side. Ryan was beside her, holding the laptop with the presentation, looking as nervous as she felt. "Ready?" he asked. "Not at all," Marina admitted. "Let's go." She opened the door. The room was even more intimidating than she had imagined. A huge oak table dominated the space, so polished that it reflected the recessed lights in the ceiling. 12 burgundy leather chairs were arranged around it. Large windows offered a panoramic view of New York. The city stretched as far as the eye could see, a sea of concrete and glass under the grey July sky. 8 people were already seated. David at the head of the table, wearing a charcoal suit that accentuated his broad shoulders. Charles on the right, a smug smile on his lips, dark hair slicked back with gel, gold cufflinks gleaming on the cuffs of his striped shirt. There was also Mark, the chief technology officer, Helena, the HR director, Fernando, the chief financial officer, and 3 external board members that Marina recognized only from photos on the company website. And there was a woman Marina hadn't expected to see, Julia Smith. She was sitting next to David, wearing a teal dress and a silver necklace. Her brown hair fell in natural waves over her shoulders, and there was a softness in her face that contrasted with her brother's harshness. When their eyes met, she gave an encouraging smile. "Good morning," Marina said, proud of how steady her voice sounded. "Thank you for the opportunity to present our progress." "Marina, Ryan, please take a seat." David gestured to 2 chairs on the left side of the table. "Let's begin." Charles leaned back in his chair, fingers intertwined over his belly. "Before we start with flowery presentations," he said, venom in every syllable, "I think it's important to contextualize this meeting. We are here because there are legitimate concerns about the viability of this project under the current leadership. Concerns based on defamatory emails without factual basis," David immediately retorted, his voice sharp as glass. "But yes, let's provide context. Marina is here to present real data, verifiable metrics, concrete results. And then the board can decide if your concerns have any merit." The atmosphere in the room turned icy. Marina saw Helena, the HR director, exchange an uncomfortable glance with Fernando. Julia kept her eyes fixed on Charles, with an expression that Marina could only describe as barely concealed disdain. "You may begin, Marina." David nodded at her. Marina stood up, connecting the laptop to the projector. Her hands trembled slightly, but she kept them steady. Ryan took control of the computer. As she positioned herself near the screen, "Board members," she began, and the project image appeared on the screen. "The AI Innovation Project was initiated 8 weeks ago. Our goal is to develop an artificial intelligence platform that optimizes corporate processes, reduces operational costs by at least 30%, and positions TechVision Inc. as a leader in technological solutions in the market." She clicked to the next slide, a bar graph showing milestones and deadlines. "We have been challenged with an aggressive timeline, 8 months for a functional prototype. Here are the milestones established at the beginning of the project." She pointed to the red bars. "And here is our actual progress. The green bars were consistently higher. As you can see, we are not just meeting deadlines, but exceeding them. We are 15 days ahead of the original schedule." Charles scoffed. "Numbers can be manipulated." "They can," Sarah agreed, turning to face him directly. "That's why I brought in external validation. Anna and Michael, our consultants, conducted an independent audit of all progress. Ryan, next slide." The screen displayed a detailed report with the logo of a respected consulting firm. "The audit confirms that we not only met all technical milestones, but the quality of the code exceeds industry standards. Bug rate, 0.3%. The industry average is 2.5%. She continued, slide after slide, dismantling every argument that Charles had raised in his email. Delays, there were none. Budget issues, they were 10% under budget. Lack of leadership availability. Sarah presented a complete log of all meetings, all decisions made, all interventions she had undertaken. And regarding the issue of full availability, Sarah made air quotes with her fingers, making it clear she was quoting Charles's email. "I would like to clarify something. Yes, I am a mother. Yes, there was an occasion when I had to leave early due to a medical emergency with my daughter. But I would like the board to consider the following." She clicked to a new slide, a comparison of hours worked. "These are the average weekly hours worked by each project leader in the company over the past 2 months. As you can see, I worked 58 hours per week on average. The average of the other leaders is 43 hours. So when someone questions my availability, I question the criteria being used." The silence that followed was absolute. Sarah could hear her own heart beating, feel the cold sweat trickling down her back under her blazer. But she stood firm, chin up, eyes scanning every face around the table. Helena, the HR director, was the first to speak. "Sarah, these results are impressive. Frankly, I am surprised. The concerns raised seemed significant, but the data tells a completely different story. Because they were lies, Julia said clearly, looking directly at Charles. Lies motivated by bias and personal politics. Julia, that's inappropriate, Charles began, his face turning red. Inappropriate is trying to destroy the career of a competent professional with defamation, Julia shot back, her psychologist's voice taking on an analytical and cold tone. That's called bullying, Charles, and in many contexts, it's illegal. I agree. Fernando, the chief financial officer, a 60-year-old man with completely white hair, adjusted his glasses. Looking at these numbers, especially the fiscal management, I see no basis for removing Sarah from leadership. On the contrary, I see reasons to keep her and provide even more resources if necessary. One of the external board members, a woman in her 50s with short grey hair, leaned forward. Mr. Charles, do you have any concrete data that contradicts what we've just seen? Because, frankly, your email created a very negative impression that does not correspond to the reality presented here. Charles opened and closed his mouth several times, looking like a fish out of water. His face was progressively redder. The data may not show underlying issues. Team culture, morale. The team has the highest morale in the department, David, the chief technology officer, interrupted, and Sarah was surprised. He had never been particularly her ally. I've had several conversations with the members of the AI project team. They all express satisfaction with Sarah's leadership. In fact, Ryan here turned down an offer from another project specifically to continue working with her. Ryan nodded in confirmation. David, who had remained quiet throughout the presentation, finally spoke. So it's decided. Sarah continues leading the AI innovation project. The board has expressed confidence in her work, and Charles, he turned to his brother-in-law with an expression that could freeze hell, you and I need to have a private conversation about professional ethics and inappropriate interference in projects that are not under your jurisdiction. Charles pushed his chair back forcefully, standing up abruptly. This is ridiculous. You are letting family politics. I am letting competence speak for itself. David cut him off, also standing up, something you clearly cannot recognize when you see it. Charles looked around the table, seeking support and finding none. His gaze briefly landed on Julia, who stared back at him with impressive coldness. You will regret this, he said, and stormed out of the room, slamming the door. The silence that followed was charged with residual tension. Then Helena began to clap, slowly at first, then with more force. The other board members joined in. Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked quickly to hold them back. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for the opportunity to defend myself. You shouldn't have to defend yourself against lies, Julia said firmly. But you did a brilliant job. The meeting dissolved into smaller conversations. Board members approached Sarah to congratulate her, ask questions about the project, express support. Ryan was beaming, clearly relieved. When the room finally emptied, only Sarah, David, and Julia remained. Sarah, Julia approached, extending her hand. Officially, I'm Julia Smith, minority shareholder and younger sister of this stubborn guy here. Sarah shook, her hand feeling the warm grip. Thank you for your support. Your call last night gave me strength. I'm glad, Julia smiled. And listen, I know things with Charles are going to get ugly. He doesn't accept losing, but you have allies. Remember that. She kissed her brother on the cheek and left, leaving Sarah and David alone in the room. A huge room. David walked over to the window, hands in his pockets, looking at the city below. Sarah stood in the middle of the room, gripping the strap of her bag tightly. You were amazing, he finally said, without turning around. The way you presented, how you defended your work, how you kept your cool even when he tried to provoke you. It was impressive. I couldn't have done it without you, Sarah admitted. Without your support, without you giving me this opportunity to present. David turned to face her. Sarah, you deserve to be in that position, not because of me, because of you. Your talent, your dedication, your work ethic. I'm just making sure you have the chance to prove that. He took a few steps toward her, closing the distance between them. But I need to warn you, Charles won't let this go. He'll look for other ways to attack you. It might be more subtle, more insidious, and you need to be prepared. I know, Sarah said, and I will be. They stood there, looking at each other, the tension between them returning with full force now that they were alone. Sarah could see the struggle in David's eyes, the desire to get closer, to cross that line they had both agreed not to cross, battling against professional responsibility. I should go, Sarah said, breaking the moment. I need to pick up Emma from school. Of course, David agreed, but he didn't move. Sarah walked to the door, but when she put her hand on the doorknob, she turned one last time. David? Yes? That dinner you mentioned, when the project is over. She paused, biting her lip. I would like that. Really. A slow smile lit up his face, transforming his stern features into something almost jovial. Me too, he said softly. More than you know. And with that Sarah left, her heart racing, a small smile playing on her lips. She had survived the dragon, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine that maybe, just maybe, she deserved something good. August arrived with a change in the air. The mornings remained chilly, but there was a promise of spring hidden on the horizon. Sarah felt as if she had crossed a storm and finally reached calmer waters. The project was progressing beyond expectations. The team was cohesive and motivated, and Charles had become a silent ghost, present in mandatory meetings but without the venom he had before. But Sarah knew the calm was deceptive. She could feel the looks Charles shot her way, the way Elizabeth, David's secretary, treated her with an even sharper coldness. There was a war being waged in the shadows, and Sarah was right in the center of it. It was a Thursday night, almost 8 o'clock, when Sarah finally shut down her computer. Her body ached from sitting for so many hours. She massaged her neck, feeling the knots of tension, and grabbed her bag. Emma had been at Grandma Betty's since 5, another debt of gratitude Sarah accumulated with her daughter's paternal grandmother. The office was practically empty. The fluorescent lights hummed softly over the deserted desks. Sarah was walking toward the elevator when she heard voices coming from the break room on the 12th floor, low, conspiratorial voices. She recognized one of them immediately, Elizabeth. I don't understand how he can be so blind, Elizabeth was saying, and there was bitterness in every word. 15 years I've worked for him, 15 years. I know every detail of his life, protected his schedule, managed his priorities, and now he barely looks at me because he's obsessed with that opportunistic single mother. Sarah froze in the hallway, hidden behind a partition. Do you think he's interested in her? Another female voice asked. Sarah recognized it as Rachel, one of the administrative assistants. Interested? Elizabeth let out a bitter laugh. He's in love. Anyone with eyes can see it. The way he looks at her, how he defends every decision she makes, how he changes when she's around. It's pathetic. But are they together? Rachel asked, curious. Not yet, Elizabeth replied, but it's only a matter of time, and when it happens it will be a disaster. She's going to use him, obviously. A woman in her situation, desperate with a child to raise, she sees him as a winning lottery ticket. Sarah felt as if she had been slapped in the face. Anger bubbled in her chest, hot and fierce. And the worst part, Elizabeth continued, is that he's changing the entire company because of her. Flexible work policies, spaces for kids, meetings during school hours, all of this because he wants to impress her. He's turning a serious company into a corporate daycare. Someone should do something, Rachel murmured. Oh, someone will, Elizabeth said, and there was something sinister in her tone. Charles is compiling evidence, late-night email exchanges, closed-door private meetings, suspicious budget approvals. When he presents it to the board, there will be no denying that something inappropriate is happening. Sarah had heard enough. She stepped out from behind the partition, entering the break room with firm steps. Elizabeth and Rachel were by the coffee machine, and both paled when they saw Sarah. "Sarah," Rachel stammered, "we didn't know you were—" "Obviously," Sarah cut her off, her eyes fixed on Elizabeth. "Elizabeth, can I talk to you? Alone?" Rachel practically ran out of the break room. Elizabeth stood her ground, chin held defiantly, but Sarah could see the uncertainty in her eyes. "I heard everything," Sarah said, keeping her voice calm with superhuman effort, "and I'm going to tell you one thing. You don't know me. You don't know anything about my life, about my motivations, about my character." "I know enough," Elizabeth shot back, but her voice didn't have the same conviction as before. "You know I'm a single mother. You know I work hard. You know David promoted me." Sarah stepped a bit closer. "But you don't know that I paid for my college by working 12 hours a day. You don't know that I've raised my daughter alone since she was 6 months old because her father decided that fatherhood wasn't for him. You don't know how many nights I've cried from exhaustion and still woke up the next day and did what needed to be done." Elizabeth looked away. "And you know what else you don't know?" Sarah continued, her voice growing firmer, "that I've never, ever asked for anything I didn't deserve, that every promotion, every opportunity was earned with sweat and competence, and that if there's anything between me and David, and I'm not saying there is, it would be based on mutual respect and genuine admiration, not opportunism." "You don't understand," Elizabeth said, and suddenly her voice was choked. "I dedicated my whole life to him, to this company. I sacrificed marriage, children, a personal life, everything to be available whenever he needed. And now he looks at you like he never looked at me." And suddenly, Sarah understood. It wasn't about her. It never had been. It was about a woman who had built her entire identity around being indispensable to David, and who now saw that position threatened. "Elizabeth," Sarah said more gently, "now, I'm not your enemy, and I'm not trying to replace you. No one could. You are an essential part of this company, and everyone knows it. But you have what I will never have," Elizabeth whispered, tears shining in her eyes. "You have his attention, for real, not as an assistant, but as a person." Sarah didn't know what to say to that, because it was true, and denying it would insult both of their intelligences. "I'm really sorry," Sarah finally said. "Truly. But helping Charles destroy me won't change anything. It will only hurt innocent people, including yourself." Elizabeth quickly wiped her eyes, reassembling her mask of cold efficiency. "I need to go," she said, and left the break room without looking back. Sarah stood there alone, her heart still racing. She grabbed her phone and, without thinking too much, typed a message to David. "Sarah, 8:17 p.m. We need to talk. It's important. Can it be tomorrow?" The response came in less than a minute. "David, 8:17 p.m. My office, 8 a.m. Is that okay?" "Sarah, 8:18 p.m. It will be." But Sarah wasn't sure if that was true. The next morning, Sarah dropped Emma off at school with a long kiss and the promise that they would have ice cream over the weekend. The girl was excited because she had been chosen to be the teacher's helper that week, a huge honor in the kindergarten universe. "Are you worried again, Mom?" Emma asked with that uncanny intuition of children. "A little bit," Sarah admitted. "But everything will be fine." "You always end up fine," Emma said, with the absolute confidence of someone who hasn't learned that the world can be cruel. "Because you're strong like Grandma." At exactly 8 o'clock, Sarah was in David's office. He was already there, wearing a light blue shirt without a tie, sleeves rolled up to the elbows. There was fresh coffee on the table, and he offered a cup to Sarah, who gratefully accepted. "You look worried," he said, sitting on the edge of the table instead of behind it. "What happened?" Sarah told him everything. The conversation she had overheard, Elizabeth's insinuations, the mention that Charles was compiling evidence of something inappropriate between her and David. When she finished, David was tense, his jaw clenched. "Son of a bitch," he murmured. "He doesn't stop, does he?" "David, he's looking for ammunition to destroy us." "To destroy me," Sarah corrected. "If he can prove that our relationship is inappropriate in any way, my credibility will go down the drain. Everything I've built will be reduced to, she slept with the boss to get ahead." "But we don't have an inappropriate relationship," David pointed out. "We haven't done anything wrong." "Perception matters more than reality," Sarah countered. "Late-night emails. I send reports when I finish working, which is usually late. Private meetings. You're the CEO. It's normal to have private meetings with project leaders. Suspicious budget approvals. Any approval you've given me can be painted as favoritism." David stood up, starting to pace the room. "So what are you suggesting? That we completely distance ourselves? That I stop supporting you?" "I'm suggesting we be strategic," Sarah said. "Let's document everything. Every decision, every approval, with clear merit-based justifications. Let's ensure that other people are always present in meetings. Let's create a paper trail that proves there's nothing inappropriate." "I hate this," David said, turning to face her. "I hate that you have to defend yourself for being competent. I hate that I have to prove I promoted you based on merit and not because of attraction." Sarah softly completed. "You can say the word, David. I know it exists. I feel it too." The air between them grew heavy. David took a step toward her. "Sarah, but we can't act on it," she continued, forcing herself to be rational even when every fiber of her being wanted something different. "Not now. Not while I work for you. Not while David is waiting for any slip-up to destroy us." "And then?" Ryan asked, stopping right in front of her. "When the project is over? When you no longer report to me?" Sarah looked up, meeting those dark brown eyes that haunted her in dreams. "After," she said, her voice coming out rougher than she intended. "We can see what happens." Ryan raised his hand as if to touch her face, but stopped midway. He let his hand fall back to his side. "You're right," he said, stepping back and creating physical distance between them. "Let's be strategic. I'll talk to Helena from HR, explain the situation, and ask her to be present in all our meetings from now on. I'll start copying you on all project-related emails, creating a transparent communication trail." "And I'll do the same," Sarah agreed. "I'll document every decision, every hour worked, every result achieved. If David wants to attack me, he'll have to face a mountain of evidence that I earned every opportunity I received." "He'll try anyway," Ryan warned. "Men like him don't give up just because the facts are against them." "I know," Sarah said, "but at least we'll be prepared." She stood up, adjusting her bag on her shoulder. "I should go. Team meeting at 9. "Sarah," Ryan called, as she was almost at the door, "thank you for trusting me, for telling me about yesterday's conversation." "We're a team," Sarah replied with a half smile, "and teams protect each other." When she left, Ryan stood in the middle of the office, hands on his hips, staring at the closed door. Elizabeth walked in moments later with a stack of documents. "Mr. Smith, the merger contracts for Digital Minds need your signature," she said, professional as always, with no trace of the emotionally vulnerable woman from last night. "Elizabeth," Ryan said, making her stop, "I need you to understand one thing. Sarah is here on merit. Any insinuation to the contrary is not just false, it's destructive." Elizabeth maintained a neutral expression. "Understood, sir. And if you or anyone else in this office spreads rumors about her, I will consider it harassment subject to termination," Ryan continued, his voice taking on that steely tone he used when he wasn't negotiating. "Am I clear?" "Perfectly," Elizabeth replied, but her eyes sparkled with something Ryan couldn't fully identify. When she left, Ryan returned to the window, looking out at the city below. He felt like he was on a tightrope, trying to balance his feelings for Sarah with his professional responsibilities, trying to protect her without giving ammunition to their enemies. It was exhausting, but when he thought of her smile, the brilliant intelligence in her eyes, the strength she showed every day, Ryan knew it was worth it. Every second of complication was worth it. September brought spring to New York. The cherry blossoms began to bloom, painting the streets in pink, and the air felt lighter, fragrant. Sarah felt as if the whole city was waking up from a long winter, and she along with it. The project was advancing spectacularly. The prototype was almost complete, 2 months ahead of schedule. But it was also in September that everything began to crumble in ways Sarah hadn't anticipated. It was a Monday, September 15th, when her mother called from Miami. Patricia rarely called during the week. She religiously respected her daughter's work hours. So when her name flashed on Sarah's phone screen at 10 in the morning, Sarah answered immediately with her heart racing. "Mom, is everything okay?" "Sarah, my daughter," Patricia's voice was weak, tired. "I didn't want to worry you, but I had to go to the hospital yesterday. Heart problem. The doctor said it's arrhythmia. I need to undergo some tests, maybe surgery." Sarah's world stopped spinning. "Surgery, Mom? What kind of surgery?" "Pacemaker placement," they said. "It's nothing." "Serious, sweetheart, but—" Patricia paused, and Sarah could hear the hidden fear in her mother's normally strong voice. "I'm all alone here. Your brothers are all scattered. George is in Washington, D.C. Carol is in the countryside. And I thought, would you—" "I'll go," Sarah said immediately, already mentally reorganizing everything. "I'll catch a flight today, Mom. You won't go through this alone." After hanging up, Sarah sat in her office, the world spinning around her. Her mother needed her, but the project was in a critical phase. They were 3 weeks away from presenting the prototype to external investors. 3 weeks that would define the future of the company and her career. "Family first," she heard Patricia's voice in her head. "Work is important, but family is everything, Sarah." She grabbed her phone and typed a message to Ryan. "Sarah, 10:24. My mom is in the hospital in Miami, needs surgery. I need to travel. Can you gather us? It's urgent." 15 minutes later, Sarah was in Ryan's office. This time, as they had agreed, Helena from HR was also present, sitting in one of the leather chairs with a tablet on her lap. "Tell us what happened," Ryan said, and there was genuine concern in his voice. Sarah explained the situation, trying to keep her voice steady, but failing when she mentioned that her mother would be alone during the surgery. "Obviously, you need to go," Ryan said immediately. "Family comes first." "But the project," Sarah started. "The project will be here when you get back," Ryan interrupted her. "Sarah, your mum needs you. Nothing we're doing—" "Here, it is more important than that." Sarah nodded in agreement. "We have protocols for family emergencies. You are entitled to medical leave to care for a direct relative. I will process the documentation today." "How long do you think you will need?" David asked gently. Sarah did some quick calculations in her head. The surgery is on Thursday. Initial recovery of a week in the hospital, then 2 more at home. I would need at least 3 weeks. 3 weeks. With only 3 weeks left until the most important presentation of the project. And Emma? David asked. Are you going to take her? Sarah hadn't even thought about that yet. Pulling Emma out of school for 3 weeks, in the middle of the school year, I don't know, she admitted, running her hands over her face. Maybe it's better for her to stay here. Grandma Betty can take care of her during the week, and on weekends. I'll take care of her, a voice said from the door. Everyone turned. Julia Smith was standing in the entrance, wearing a sunny yellow dress and a wool coat. Sarah had no idea how she knew about this meeting. Excuse me, Sarah, Helena told me you were here, Julia explained, stepping into the room. And I heard about your mother. Sarah, I'm so sorry. Julia, what do you mean by, I'll take care of her? David asked, frowning. I mean, I can stay with Emma on the weekends while Sarah is in Miami, Julia said simply. I've worked with kids for 15 years. I have experience. And honestly, I would love to get to know the little warrior who put my brother in his place. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Julia, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering. Julia sat down next to Sarah, taking her hand. Listen, I know we're practically strangers, but I also know what it's like to be alone in tough times, and no one should have to choose between caring for their mother and caring for their daughter. David watched the scene with an expression that Sarah couldn't fully decipher. There was pride there, admiration for his sister, but also something deeper, a tenderness that made Sarah's heart tighten. It's decided then, Helena said, always practical. Sarah, you have approved leave. Julia will help with Emma on the weekends. And as for the project, Ryan will take over temporarily, Sarah said, already having thought of that. He knows every line of code, every decision made. Jessica can provide support, and I will be available by phone and video call whenever you need. No, David said firmly. You will be with your mother, not on work video calls. The project can wait, Sarah. Your mother cannot. Sarah looked at him, and in that moment, with Helena and Julia there as witnesses, she allowed herself to feel complete gratitude for the man who was making everything easier. Thank you, she whispered. 24 hours later, Sarah was on an American Airlines flight to Miami, Emma sitting next to her drawing on her tablet. They had decided in the end that it would be better for Emma to understand the situation, see her grandma, and know what was happening. Mom, is Grandma going to get better? Emma asked, her big eyes worried. Yes, my love, Sarah replied, pulling her daughter closer. The doctors will take good care of her. The 3-hour flight felt like an eternity. When they finally landed at Miami Airport, the warm, humid air of the Northeast embraced Sarah like a familiar blanket. She had grown up there, in that vibrant city of beaches and culture, before moving to New York in search of better opportunities. The hospital where Patricia was admitted was in Ocean View. It was a modern glass and concrete building, but it couldn't completely disguise the overwhelmed healthcare system of the U.S. Sarah and Emma found Patricia in a 5th-floor room, a small space she shared with another patient, separated only by a thin curtain. Patricia looked smaller in the hospital bed. At 62, she had always been a force of nature, strong, determined, tireless. But now, connected to monitors that beeped softly with an IV in her arm, she looked fragile for the first time. My daughter, she said when she saw Sarah, and their voices filled with tears. And my beautiful granddaughter, come here. Emma ran to the bed, but with surprising delicacy for a 5-year-old, she was careful not to bump into the wires. Grandma, are you sick? She asked. Just a little, my love, Patricia replied, stroking Emma's curls. But I'll get better. My heart just needs a special helper. In the 3 days leading up to the surgery, Sarah practically lived at the hospital. Emma stayed with Aunt Carol during the day, who had managed to come down from the countryside to help. At night, Sarah stayed at a simple hotel near the hospital, collapsing exhausted into bed after hours of keeping her mother company. It was on the third night that her phone rang. It was David. "Hi," she answered, surprised. It was almost 10 at night. "Hi." His voice sounded tired through the line. "Sorry for calling late. I just wanted to check how you are. How is your mother?" Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. She was so used to being strong alone that she had forgotten how nice it was to have someone care. "She is scared," Sarah admitted, walking out to the small balcony of the hotel room. Down below, Miami was alive with its nightlife, music leaking from bars, cars passing by, the distant sound of the sea. "And I am too, if I'm honest." "It's normal to be scared," David said gently. "But she will." Marina took a deep breath. "And you are not alone, Sarah. I know you are physically, but I am here. If you need to talk, vent, anything." "How is the project?" Sarah asked, changing the subject before she could start to cry. "We're not going to talk." "About work," David said firmly. "Ryan is doing well, by the way, but that's not what this is about. How is Emma?" Sarah smiled. "She's making friends with all the nurses. Yesterday she drew a huge heart for Grandma and taped it to the wall of her room. The other patients love her." "She is special," David said, and there was a warmth in his voice that made Sarah's heart race. "Just like her mother." They stayed on the phone for another 40 minutes, talking about everything and nothing. David shared how Julia had shown up at the office with a complete activity plan for when Emma returned, including a trip to Central Park and the Science Museum. Sarah talked about how she was rediscovering Miami, the city she had left behind, but that still called her daughter. When they finally hung up, Sarah felt lighter, less alone. Patricia's surgery was on Thursday morning at 7 o'clock. Sarah was in the waiting room with Emma, Carol and George, the brother who had managed to come from Washington, D.C. The 4 hours that the surgery lasted were the longest of Sarah's life. Emma was incredibly well-behaved, drawing and colouring, only occasionally asking when Grandma would come out. George paced back and forth. Carol prayed softly, her fingers running over the beads of a rosary. When the surgeon finally came out, still in scrubs, the relief on his face said everything before he even spoke. "The surgery was a success," he announced. "The pacemaker is functioning perfectly. She will need a few days of recovery here, but the prognosis is excellent." Sarah broke down in tears of relief. Emma hugged her legs, confused but relieved to see her mother smiling through the tears. Later, when Patricia woke up from anesthesia, groggy but aware, she held Sarah's hand with surprising strength. "You came," she murmured. "Of course I came, Mom," Sarah replied, kissing her calloused hand from decades of domestic work. "I will always come when you need me." "You seem different," Patricia observed with that maternal intuition that is impossible to deceive. "Lighter somehow. There's someone, isn't there?" Sarah laughed, wiping away tears. "Mom, you just came out of heart surgery. It's not the time to talk about men." "It's always time to talk about happiness," Patricia insisted, squeezing her hand. "And I want you to be happy, Sarah. You deserve it. After everything you've been through, everything you've sacrificed, you deserve to be truly loved." "I know, Mom," Sarah whispered. "And maybe I'm learning to believe that." That night, Sarah sent a message to David. "Sarah, 10:41 p.m. The surgery went well. My mum is recovering. Thank you for everything." The response came quickly. "David, 10:43 p.m. Thank God, I'm so happy. Rest, Sarah, and remember, you are not alone." Sarah looked at that message for a long time, a small smile playing on her lips. No, she realized, for the first time in a long time, she truly was not alone. October arrived with an explosion of colors. New York was covered in yellow tulip trees that looked like pots of gold scattered throughout the city. Sarah had returned from Miami 2 weeks ago, leaving Patricia recovering well under Carol's care. The daily video calls showed a mother getting stronger, complaining that she was bored from too much rest. An excellent sign that she was truly improving. The AI innovation project was entering its final phase. The presentation for investors was scheduled for the first week of November, just 3 weeks away. The tension in the office was palpable, but it was a good tension, energizing, the kind that comes when you know you are creating something truly special. Sarah was in her office, reviewing the final adjustments to the prototype, when Ryan walked in with a strange expression on his face, half worried, half irritated. "Sarah, you need to see this," he said, turning his laptop around. It was an email, an anonymous one, sent to several members of the project team. Sarah read it, feeling the blood freeze in her veins. "Do you know why Sarah Johnson really got the promotion? Ask about the private dinners with the CEO. Ask about the late-night messages. Ask why budgets are approved without question. Some people rise through competence, others rise through other means." "Charles," Sarah said, her voice coming out as hard as stone, "his fingerprints are all over this." "It's too obvious for him to be directly involved," Ryan argued, "but it was definitely orchestrated by him." Sarah grabbed her phone and called. Helena from HR. 20 minutes later, she was in Helena's office along with David, who had been immediately summoned. "This is harassment," Helena said, furious, her reading glasses dangling from a pearl chain swaying with the vehemence of her gestures. "And defamation. I will trace the IP from where this email was sent." "It will lead nowhere," David said, but his voice was filled with a contained anger that Sarah rarely saw. "It was probably sent from a public computer or using a VPN. It was calculated to be impossible to trace." "So, what do we do?" Sarah asked, feeling the weight of months of work threatening to crumble. "The entire team received this. People are going to start questioning, doubting." "You are going to do what you've always done," David said, looking directly at her. "You are going to let your work speak for you, and I will do one thing." The next afternoon, David called a general meeting. Not just for the project team, but for the entire technology department. Over 50 people crowded into the auditorium on the 12th floor. Sarah was sitting in the front, Rao next to Ryan and Jessica, her stomach churning with nerves. David was on the small stage, wearing jeans and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, a deliberately casual choice that Sarah recognized as a strategy to appear more approachable. "All of you received an anonymous email yesterday," David began bluntly. "A cowardly, lying and defamatory email against Sarah Johnson. So I'm going to be very clear about a few things." He started pacing the stage, his hands in his pockets. "Sarah was promoted because she is the most competent professional I've seen in years, because she solves problems that others don't even identify. Because she leads with empathy, without sacrificing excellence. Because she works more hours than any other project leader in this company, while still managing to be a present mum for her daughter." Sarah felt tears prick at her eyes. "Are there private dinners?" "Yes. Because strategic project leaders need direct alignment with the presidency." "Are there late-night messages?" "Yes. Because Sarah works late delivering exceptional results." "Are budgets approved without question?" "No. Every penny is justified, documented, and audited." David stopped, looking directly at the audience. "But I'll be honest about one thing. I deeply admire Sarah Johnson as a professional, as a mom, as a human being, and that admiration does not diminish the validity of her achievements. On the contrary, it makes everything she has accomplished while facing biases and obstacles that many of you will never have to face even more impressive." The silence in the auditorium was absolute. "If anyone here has a problem with Sarah's leadership, you can come talk to me directly," David continued. But if I find out that someone is spreading rumors, insinuations, or lies about her or any other employee, that person will no longer have a place in this company. Am I clear? A murmur of agreement swept through the room. Great. Now get back to work. We have an investor presentation in 3 weeks, and we're going to crush it. As people began to disperse, many passed by Sarah offering words of support. Jessica hugged her tightly. Ryan gave her a supportive pat on the shoulder, but it was when Sarah was leaving the auditorium that she saw a figure leaning against the hallway wall. Charles. He was watching her with an expression that Sarah couldn't decipher. There was anger there, yes, but also something resembling resignation. "You won," he said as Sarah walked past him. Sarah stopped, turning to face him. "This was never a war, Charles. You made it one." "He's in love with you," Charles said, and there was no more venom in his voice, just a weary acknowledgement. "Anyone with eyes can see." "And so," Sarah asked, "that doesn't change the fact that I deserved every opportunity I received. It doesn't change that the project is exceeding all expectations. It doesn't change that I'm good at what I do." Charles ran a hand over his face, suddenly looking much older than his 45 years. "Julia is asking for a divorce," he said abruptly. "She wants half of everything, and David is on her side." And suddenly Sarah understood. It didn't justify, but it explained. Charles wasn't fighting against her. He was fighting against the feeling of losing everything: his marriage, his influence in the company, his brother-in-law's respect. "I'm sorry about your marriage," Sarah said, and to her own surprise, it was sincere. "But attacking other people isn't going to fix your problems, Charles." "I know," he admitted, and there was something broken in his voice. "But it was all I knew how to do." He stepped away from the wall and started walking down the hallway. He stopped after a few steps, turning one last time. "For what it's worth, you're really good. And if I hadn't been so caught up in jealousy and politics, maybe I would have recognized that sooner." And with that, Charles left, leaving Sarah alone in the empty hallway, processing that surreal conversation. The next 3 weeks were a controlled frenzy. Sarah and her team worked 12, 14, sometimes 16 hours a day, refining every detail of the prototype. But there was a difference now. It was no longer just Sarah carrying the weight alone. Ryan stepped in when she needed to pick up Emma. Jessica covered when Sarah had follow-up medical appointments with her mom via video call. The team functioned like a well-oiled machine, each piece supporting the other, and David was always there, not as a boss, but as a silent partner, a coffee appearing on her desk when she was too tired to get one, an encouraging message on her phone after particularly tough days, a constant presence that didn't suffocate but sustained. Emma was thriving too. The weekends with Julia had turned into a genuine friendship. The therapist had a special way with children, and Emma loved the adventures they went on together. Museums, parks, even a trip to the municipal theatre to see The Nutcracker. On the day of the investor presentation, Sarah woke up at 5 in the morning with her stomach in knots from nerves. She wore her best outfit, a navy blue dress that Julia had insisted on buying for her as a gift, saying every woman deserved to feel powerful during important moments. New shoes that didn't hurt, hair down in natural waves, makeup done just right. Emma woke up and, seeing her mom all dressed up, clapped her hands. "You look beautiful, just like a princess who's going to save the kingdom." "Not quite like that, sweetheart," Sarah laughed, but her heart warmed with the girl's unconditional support. "Yes, you do," Emma insisted with that seriousness of a child. "Emma, you're going to go out there and show everyone how amazing you are. And then, when it's all over, maybe you and David can finally be real boyfriend and girlfriend." Sarah almost choked on her coffee. "Emma, where did you get that idea?" "Mom, I'm..." "I'm 5 years old, I'm not blind," Emma replied with relentless logic. "Every time you talk about him, you smile differently. And Aunt Julia said that David gets all goofy when someone mentions you." "Aunt Julia talks too much," Sarah murmured, but she couldn't help the smile. The auditorium of Tech Vision Inc. was packed. It was 3 in the afternoon when the presentation began. 20 potential investors, board members, company directors, and even some representatives from the tech media were present. Sarah was on stage with Ryan and Jessica, the slides projected on the huge screen behind them. David was sitting in the front row, next to Julia. He gave a minimal wave of encouragement when Sarah's eyes met his. "Good afternoon," Sarah began, her voice steady, clear, confident. "My name is Sarah Johnson, and I'm here to show you the future of artificial intelligence applied to corporate solutions." For the next hour, Sarah shone. She explained every technical aspect with clarity that even laypeople could understand. She demonstrated the prototype live, showing how AI could optimize processes that previously took hours into mere minutes. She presented conservative financial projections that still showed a return on investment within 18 months. Ryan complemented her with technical data. Jessica showcased practical use cases. The team functioned like a perfectly tuned symphony. When they finished, there was a moment of silence. Then, starting with David and spreading through the room, people began to applaud. It wasn't just polite, it was enthusiastic, genuine, impressed. During the Q&A session, investors asked dozens of questions. Sarah answered them all competently, sometimes quickly consulting with Ryan about deeper technical specifications, but always in absolute control of the content. One of the investors, a man in his 50s with grey hair whom Sarah recognized as being from Venture Capital Partners, stood up at the end. "Ms. Johnson, in 20 years of funding startups and innovation projects, I've rarely seen such an impressive combination of technical vision, commercial viability, and clear presentation," he said. "You can count on our investment, and frankly, if you decide to do a spin-off of this technology, I would love to discuss additional funding." Sarah felt tears of relief and triumph prick her eyes, but she maintained her professional composure. "Thank you, that means a lot." When the presentation finally ended and people began to disperse into small group conversations, Sarah stepped off the stage with shaky legs. Ryan and Jessica hugged her, celebrating. "You crushed it," Jessica shouted. "It was perfect." "We crushed it," Sarah corrected. It was teamwork. David approached, Julia by his side. There was radiant pride on his face. "Sarah, that was—" He started but seemed to struggle to find the right words. "You were spectacular." "The project was spectacular," Sarah corrected. "I just presented the work of an amazing team." "Always so modest," Julia said, smiling. "Accept the compliment, girl. You just secured funding from some of the biggest investors in the country. That's huge." The following hours were a blur of conversations, business cards being exchanged, proposals being discussed. When Sarah finally managed to leave the office, it was almost 8 in the evening. The sky was starry, a rarity in New York, and the air was fragrant with the scent of jasmine from the gardens on Fifth Avenue. She was in the parking lot, looking for an Uber on her phone, when she heard footsteps behind her. "Sarah, wait." It was David. He had taken off his blazer, his tie was loosened, and the sleeves of his shirt were rolled up. He looked tired but happy. "I thought you were still in there with the investors," Sarah said. "I let Mark take over," David replied, walking up to stand close to her. "I needed to tell you something." "What?" David took a deep breath, running his hand through his hair, a gesture of nervousness that Sarah had learned to recognize. "The project is over. Officially, you delivered, exceeded. All expectations, secured funding. Starting Monday, you will report directly to the board as the director of the new AI division. Sarah blinked, processing that information. Director? David, You deserve it, he interrupted her. And more importantly, I won't technically be your boss anymore. We will be on equal hierarchical levels. Sarah's heart began to race. She knew where this conversation was heading. David, I know that 3 months ago I said that when the project was finished, I would invite you to dinner, David continued, taking a step closer. And I know it's been a complicated journey, full of obstacles and challenges. I know you have a daughter, responsibilities, a life that is already complex enough without adding a relationship. He paused, his eyes fixed on hers. But, Sarah, I've spent the last few months watching you be the strongest, most competent, most incredible woman I've ever known. I've seen you juggle impossible work and motherhood. I've seen you face prejudice with dignity. I've seen you care for your sick mother while still delivering exceptional results. And with every moment, I fell a little more in love. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face. So yes, David said, a nervous smile on his lips, I would like to invite you to dinner, not as CEO and employee, but as David and Sarah, as two people who have spent months dancing around something that we both felt but couldn't act on, as two adults who deserve a chance to see where this could lead. Sarah wiped her tears, laughing through them. Did you practice that speech? About 50 times in the mirror, David admitted, laughing as well. Julia helped me. She said if I didn't do it today, she would tell you herself that I've been in love with you since your daughter scolded me 8 months ago. 8 months, Sarah repeated, shaking her head in wonder. Feels like an eternity. Seems like yesterday. So? David asked, hopeful, but also nervously in a way that Sarah found adorable. Will you have dinner with me tomorrow night? I can pick you up at 8? Sarah stepped forward, closing the distance between them until they could feel each other's warmth. Yes, she simply said, I accept. And then, there in the parking lot of Tech Vision Inc., under the rare stars of New York, Sarah Johnson and David Smith kissed for the first time. It was soft, tentative at first, then deeper, more certain. It was the kind of kiss that felt both inevitable and surprising at the same time. It was the kiss of two people who had fought against their attraction for months and finally could surrender to it. When they pulled away, both were smiling. That was, David started. Better than I imagined, Sarah finished. And I imagined it many times. Me too, he admitted, laughing. Probably inappropriately during important meetings. Sarah laughed, resting her forehead against his. So tomorrow at 8? Tomorrow at 8, David confirmed. And Sarah, thank you for making me wait. Thank you for being so professional, so ethical, for not making things easy. It made everything even more special. Was it worth it? She asked. Every second of torture, he replied, kissing her again. The following Saturday, Sarah was home with Emma, preparing chocolate truffles for a school party when the doorbell rang. It was a delivery, a large package with a red bow. Inside was a professionally framed drawing. It was the drawing Emma had made months ago, Sarah as a superhero holding a computer, and Emma with the words, "My mum is the strongest woman in the world." Along with it was a card. Sarah, you taught me that strength is not never falling, but always getting back up. That vulnerability is not weakness, but courage. That asking for help is not failing, but growing. Thank you for making me a better person. I can't wait for all the adventures we will still have together. With love and eternal admiration, David. P.S. Emma approved this message and said if I didn't treat you like a princess, she would put me, In my place again." Sarah laughed through her tears, hugging the frame tightly. "Mom, why are you crying?" Emma asked, appearing in the room with chocolate on her face. "Because sometimes," Sarah said, pulling her daughter into a hug, "we cry when we're very, very happy." "Did David make you happy?" Emma asked, always direct. "Yes, my love. He makes me happy." "So can he be my stepdad?" Emma asked, with the simple logic of children. Sarah laughed. "Hold on, little one step at a time." But as she held her daughter and looked at the framed drawing, Sarah allowed herself to imagine that future, a future where she wasn't alone carrying the world on her shoulders, a future where she had a partner who respected her, admired her, and was willing to be present for her and for Emma, a future that she finally believed she deserved. That night, wearing the new dress that Julia had helped her pick out, Sarah opened the door at 8 on the dot. David was there, wearing jeans and a light blue shirt, holding a bouquet of sunflowers. Sarah's favorite flowers, a detail she had mentioned casually months ago and that he had remembered. "You look beautiful," he said, and there was something in his eyes that made Sarah feel exactly that. "You too," she replied, accepting the flowers. Emma came running down the hallway, already in her pajamas. "David!" she shouted, hugging his legs. "Are you going to take good care of my mom?" "I will," David promised solemnly, kneeling to be at eye level with the girl. "I'll treat her like the princess she is." "And will you learn how to braid hair?" Emma asked, completely serious, because all girls need someone who knows how to braid hair. David looked at Sarah, confused, who just laughed and shrugged. "I'll learn how to braid hair," David promised. "I'll look for tutorials on YouTube." "Okay then," Emma approved. "You can go." And so, with the blessing of a 5-year-old who had triggered it all with an act of fierce courage 8 months ago, Sarah Johnson and David Smith set out for the first of many dinners. It would be a path with challenges, balancing relationship, work, and motherhood. There would be curious looks at the office, inevitable gossip, tough moments. But there would also be mutual support, shared laughter, a partnership built on genuine respect and admiration. And when Sarah looked back months later, she would realize that it all started with the fierce words of a little girl defending her mom, with a CEO who chose to listen instead of fire, with the courage to be vulnerable, with the decision that she deserved more. Because in the end, true love is not about fairy tales or saviors. It's about two imperfect people choosing every day to be present for each other. It's about building something real, complicated, wonderful, together. And Sarah Johnson, single mom, systems analyst, now director, finally allowed herself to believe that she deserved exactly that.